Hi, this is Ann Brady, and I will be reading an excerpt from my book, A New Beginning: The Story of My Adoption, Life, and Service, illustrated by Eric C. Brady. We went to the Montgomery Zoo many times. The boys enjoyed going to the zoo. In fact, we enjoyed it as much as the boys. There was always so much to see. In the summer, they have hoses that sprinkle water so that people could cool off. They also had an inside museum, the Man Wildlife Learning Museum, where you could look at exhibits from the north like moose, caribou, tools of the indigenous people. Ed and I also worked with the Knights of Columbus and the Ladies Auxiliary to run concessions at concerts or events for a percentage of the proceeds at the Montgomery Civic Center. The proceeds went for scholarship funds for our young adults going to college. The Knights of Columbus would pick two students, and the Ladies Auxiliary would do the same from a list of applicants. Running the concessions had a second benefit. We got to listen to great music and hear shows. We would take turns taking short breaks and go see some of the acts. We got to hear the Beach Boys, B.B. King, and see the Spirit of the Spring dance. One year, I took both Eric and Mike to see the Montgomery Jubilee City Fest. They wanted to listen to heavy metal, and I heard that they were going to have both a Pink Floyd laser light show and Leonard Skinner at the Jubilee City Fest. We drove into Montgomery, and I looked for a side street where I didn't have to pay for parking. We walked to the City Fest. As we entered, there was a man with a sign saying, "You're going to hell," outside the gates. We listened to a lot of different bands. The heavy metal bands started giving me a headache. We bought food and drinks. We went over to see the laser light show as it got dark. There was a movie screen there also. They played Dark Side of the Moon during the laser light show while showing The Wizard of Oz to the music. It was amazing and awesome. We enjoyed it thoroughly. The next day we went back again. We went to see Leonard Skinner, which is now comprised of one original member of Leonard Skinner and the children and grandchildren of the original members. They played old Leonard Skinner songs and some new ones. Then they showed an old film of the band on tour while they played music. It was filmed by a member of the band. It showed them riding the tour bus and places they stopped. It was a wonderful tribute to a great band. In 2001, Eric graduated high school. We told Eric he could go to college, get a job, or join the military. Eric decided to go into the military. At school, some Army recruiters talked to Eric about the Army. They contacted Eric about joining the Army. Eric said that they wanted to come to the house and meet with him alone. We told him that we wanted to be there while they talked to him. Eric told the recruiters, and they said if we wanted to be there, we would all have to come down to the recruiting station to talk. Ed later called the commander of the recruiting station and filed a complaint about the recruiters. They called us back and arranged to see us at our house. They gave their spiel. We told them we would let them know. They asked us to at least let them take him to take the ASVAB test. We agreed. We had already talked to Eric about the different services and what they had to offer. I told Eric that the military had a GI Bill that he could pay into and they would match. The Army would pay for 80% of his education, while the Navy and the Air Force would pay 100%. Eric entered delayed entry into the Navy. He joined to be a submariner. Eric left for basic, and when he was graduating from basic, we drove up to Illinois to see him graduate from Naval Station Great Lakes. We stayed overnight at a local hotel. I brought my Class A's to see our son graduate. The next day, we arrived early. As we were waiting to be taken to the seating for the graduation, a young girl with her mother was talking to me. The young lady was about 14. She asked me if I was there to see my grandson graduate. Her mom started poking her and shushing her as she was asking the question. Her mom was mortified. I was unpleasantly surprised at her rudeness. I looked at her and said, I'm here to see my son graduate from basic training. The stunned and slightly confused look on the teenager's face was priceless. Hopefully, the child learned a lesson about assuming. It was wonderful seeing Eric graduate. And below is a picture of me and Eric at his graduation. He's in his naval uniform, and I'm in my Class A uniform. On February 3rd, 2002, we went up to the lodge to watch a Super Bowl game. I was excited because my team, the New England Patriots, were playing the LA Rams. We were watching the SB with a friend of ours, Terry Ritchie, aka T Bone. Terry was called T Bone because of how skinny he was. T Bone had been drinking, and he was rooting for the LA Rams. About the third quarter, the Rams were losing, and T Bone decided he wanted to make a bet with me on the game. Ed and I tried to talk him out of the bet. We couldn't, so we decided that if T Bone lost the bet, he would have to shave his mustache. T Bone's mustache was a sight to behold, a handlebar mustache that he took great pride in. If I lost a bet, then I would have to buy T Bone a beer. The Rams started to make a comeback, but in the end, the Patriots won. Well, T Bone left the lodge and disappeared for a while. About an hour later, T Bone came back, minus his pride and joy, his mustache. While we were sitting at the bar, T Bone looked all upset. When we asked him why, he said he went to all the trouble to shave off his mustache and no one noticed. I thought my days of going to high school football games were over now that Eric had graduated. Silly me. Michael started high school that year. Mike also took band, but he played the alto saxophone. I found that sitting by myself in the bleachers wasn't much fun. I didn't go to away games, but I went to all the home games. I sat by my old neighbor and her son sometimes, but it wasn't the same. I decided to go to sign up for concessions at the stadium. I like concessions. I spent most of my time wrapping hamburgers and hot dogs up. It kept me busy, and when the weather got cooler, I could warm up by the grill. Helped out at concessions for the 4 years Mike played in the marching band. Mike later in high school played the contrabass clarinet in concert just to prove he played just like his brother. The nurse supervisor, Kathy, came to me one day and asked a favor of me. Her husband was adopted and wanted to find out who his birth mother was. I told her I would see what I could find out. She gave me all the information they had on her. I told Kathy that her husband should request his non identifying file from the Department of Social Services. I also told her to look and see if there was a state registry for the state he was born in. I researched and asked for help from several search angels. Search angels are trained to offer their services to adoptees and birth families to search for free. I was able to find the name of his birth mother and her address and phone number. Kathy told me that she would give her husband the information. Several weeks later, after I gave her the information, she came to talk to me. She said that she was confused because even though her husband wanted the information, he wouldn't try to contact her. I explained that the reason he may be hesitant to contact his birth mother was fear of rejection. I explained this was common because an adoptee may feel that his mother gave him away once. He worries that if he contacts her, she may deny having a child or could admit it and not want contact. I told Kathy not to push, that he would eventually come to a decision. She just had to be patient. It has happened to adoptees and can hurt because you feel rejected twice. When you start searching for birth family, you have to have two opposing expectations. Hope for the best outcome and expect for the worst. The best outcome would mean they were looking for you or hope that someday you would find them and contact them. There's another outcome when looking for your birth family, which is they never knew you existed and are happy you found them. Several years later, Kathy retired. I was sorry to see her go. At our work, our lab director quit after a fight with the board of directors of MAO. That left MAO looking for a lab director. At the same time, the doctor left as lab director. Our director of MAO was resigning. One of our doctors would take over as director of MAO, but she wasn't licensed to be a lab director. I called the licensing office and let them know that we didn't have a lab director anymore. I also wrote a letter to them informing them of the change. After they got the letter, I received a call. I was informed I was licensed as an MT, as I was licensed as an MT, that I was qualified to be the lab director. I informed the human HR director of this. The director of MAO wrote a letter to the state licensing office to inform them that I was the new lab director of MAO. He dated and signed the letter. I made several copies of the letter. I gave one to HR to put into my personnel file. I mailed one to the state licensing office, and one copy I took home with me to put in my files at home. I've always believed in CYA, cover your ass. When we had our next sorry. When we had our next laboratory meeting, one of the nurses announced to the phlebotomist that I was now the lab director. She looked like she had sucked a lemon when she made the announcement. The only person who clapped or recognized the announcement was a male phlebotomist named Sherman. The rest seemed frozen in time. They were so enthusiastic. I thanked Sherman after the meeting. When our director finally resigned and our doctor took over, she did a good job, but it was hard for her to be in charge and still see patients. Mike was finally in Boy Scouts, which he enjoyed. I took him to meetings. He went to summer camp where he earned a lot of badges. Mike also helped out at the church as an altar boy. Mike sometimes helped me watch the nursery room when the usual volunteers didn't show up. Mike helped one time at the children's Christmas party at the lodge. He dressed up as the Grinch, helping Santa hand out gifts to the children. During Lent, Mike and I would go to the Seder meals on Fridays. We would bring a meatless dish when it was our turn. Then we would go to church for the Stations of the Cross. I got into trouble over the reading for the Stations of the Cross. Mike was supposed to read the part of the centurion, but they were short and an altar boy. Marie said she would find someone to read the part of the centurion. I told her I could do it, that I could make my voice deep. She had me read the part. I pulled a prank on her. I read it in a high-pitched voice. Marie at first looked aghast, then ripped the part out of my hand while trying not to laugh. She found someone else to do it. I just couldn't help myself. February 1st, Ed and I went up to the lodge to watch the Super Bowl. New England Patriots were playing the Carolina Panthers. This time, T-Bone decided he would bet Ed on the outcome of the SB. The bet was slightly different this time. Ed took the Patriots. The bet was that if the Patriots won, T-Bone would have to shave a part of his mustache, the handlebars. If the Panthers won, Ed would buy T-Bone a beer. Again, New England Patriots won, and T-Bone shaved off the ends of his mustache. T-Bone was never able to grow a handlebar mustache again. At work one day, our new director at MAO, Mike, called me to his office. He had a question. He said that he heard me say I was the lab director, but he heard others say I was the lab manager. I explained that I was the lab director, and there was a letter in my personnel file that stated that I was appointed the lab director. I told him the original letter was sent to the Alabama Certification and Licensure Office. He asked me to bring the copy to him. I went to Human Resources and asked to see my file. I looked through my personnel file and couldn't find the letter. I was very upset about this. I told Mike that I couldn't find the letter, but I had a copy of the letter at home. He asked me to bring it into him the next day. When I got home, I searched and found the letter. I made a copy of the letter and placed the copy in my files. The next day, I gave Mike the copy of the letter, and he agreed that I was indeed the lab director. I went to Human Resources and had the letter put in my personnel file. I watched to make sure the human resource person put it in my personnel file. What ticked me off was that I believed the original director of MAO, while he signed the letter naming me as lab director, had told the HR not to put it in my personnel file. I don't think they wanted it recognized. I didn't know why they wanted it kept secret. They were paying me more money. That is, excuse me. That is all I'm reading for That is all I'm reading for today. Happy Hump Day, and I hope everybody has a great day. And thank you. And please buy my book at Amazon.com.